It was one of those evenings when the sky couldn't decide if it wanted to cry or whisper its sadness through the rain. The streets were nearly empty, lit only by the soft glow of streetlights reflecting on puddles. Daniel walked slowly, his coat pulled tight against the drizzle, his mind wandering as it often did. The sound of rain on pavement always brought memories rushing back, memories of laughter that once filled his home, of dinners for two, of a life he'd built and lost too soon. His wife, Lily, had been gone for 2 years now, and though time had dulled the sharp edges of grief, it had never erased them. That night, Daniel would have walked past the bus stop like always, lost in thought, if not for a small movement that caught his eye. There, standing under the flickering light, was a woman trying to shield her groceries with a paper bag that was already soaked through. The rain poured harder, and she tried to tuck the bag closer to her chest, but it was useless. She didn't have an umbrella. She didn't even seem to care about getting wet anymore. There was something about her stillness, the quiet resignation on her face, that stopped Daniel in his tracks. He hesitated for a moment. He wasn't the kind of man who approached strangers easily. But something inside him whispered, "Help her." He looked down at the umbrella in his hand, the same one Lily had bought years ago, bright blue with tiny white flowers along the edge. Without thinking too long, Daniel walked over and held it above her head. The woman startled at first, then looked up. Her eyes, soft and tired, met his. She looked like someone who hadn't smiled in a long time but used to know how. Daniel gave a small nod, a silent gesture that said, "It's okay, take it." She tried to protest, shaking her head lightly, but he simply smiled and kept holding the umbrella over her as the rain fell harder around them. They stood there for a few quiet moments, the world narrowing down to the small circle of dry space between them. Finally, the bus arrived, its lights cutting through the mist. She turned to him, her voice gentle and low, thanking him. Daniel just nodded again, unsure what to say. As she stepped onto the bus, he watched her go, not realizing that this small act of kindness would be the beginning of something that would change both of their lives. The next day, Daniel found himself thinking about her again. He didn't even know her name, yet she lingered in his mind. Maybe it was the sadness in her eyes, or maybe it was how the world had seemed a little less heavy when they stood together under that umbrella. That evening, as he walked home again, he saw something on the bench near the bus stop, a small folded note, protected under a stone. His name was written on it. He opened it carefully. Inside were just a few words, "Thank you for the umbrella. It's been a long time since anyone's been kind to me. My name is Emma." Daniel felt a warmth spread through his chest that he hadn't felt in years. The note didn't ask for anything. It didn't offer anything. It was just simple gratitude, honest and pure. And that was enough to make him return to that same spot the next day, hoping he might see her again. Days passed before he did. One evening, the rain returned, lighter this time, and there she was, Emma, waiting for the same bus, holding his blue umbrella. She smiled when she saw him, the first real smile he'd seen from her. She walked over and handed him a thermos of coffee, still warm. She said she'd made too much that morning and thought he might like some. He accepted, trying not to show how much the small gesture meant to him. They talked, awkward at first, then easier as the minutes passed. Emma told him she worked part-time at the library nearby, that she had moved to town after losing her husband 3 years ago. She said the rain had always made her feel lonely since then. Daniel listened quietly, feeling the weight of her story intertwine with his own. Two hearts that had been broken by loss, meeting in the simplest of circumstances, a shared moment of kindness. What started as brief encounters at the bus stop soon became longer conversations. Sometimes they'd sit on the nearby bench, sipping coffee and talking about everything and nothing, books, music, the quiet ache of missing someone you loved. Daniel began to look forward to those evenings, to the sound of Emma's laughter when she finally began to let it out again. Weeks turned into months. Emma started bringing an extra sandwich, always pretending it was a spare, and Daniel started walking that route on purpose, rain or shine. Slowly, something beautiful began to bloom, quietly, without fanfare, like spring flowers after a long winter. One evening, the sky was clear for once, painted in shades of gold and purple as the sun set behind the rooftops. Emma and Daniel sat together on the same bench where they'd first spoken. She told him she'd been offered a full-time position at the library and was thinking about staying in town for good. Daniel smiled and said maybe it was about time both of them stopped running from the rain. There was a long silence then, the comfortable kind. He looked at her, noticing how her eyes caught the last bit of sunlight, and realized how much lighter his heart felt when she was near. He hadn't planned to say anything, but the words found their way out. He said he didn't know if life gave second chances often, but if it ever did, he was grateful this might be one of them. Emma didn't reply right away. Instead, she took his hand gently and said that maybe kindness was how second chances begin. From that day on, they didn't stand at the bus stop anymore. They walked together. Sometimes through rain, sometimes under a clear sky, but always side by side. Their bond wasn't built on grand gestures or dramatic confessions, it was built on quiet moments of care. The way he carried her bag without asking. The way she always saved him the last cookie. The way both of them learned to smile again. People in the neighborhood began to notice them, the man and woman who always walked together, often sharing one bright blue umbrella. Some even said they were proof that love can find you long after you've stopped looking for it. Years later, on a rainy afternoon much like the one when they first met, Emma found Daniel sitting by the window, watching droplets trace paths down the glass. She placed a hand on his shoulder and smiled. They didn't need to speak to remember. That single act of offering an umbrella had rewritten both their lives. It's strange how something so small, a gesture, a smile, an act of kindness, can ripple outwards, changing the course of two lonely lives. Daniel had once believed his story had ended the day he said goodbye to his wife. Emma had felt the same about her husband. But life, in its quiet way, had proven them both wrong. Kindness had not only healed their pain, it had opened their hearts again. It had reminded them that even in the middle of storms, people can be someone's shelter. The rain outside continued to fall, but inside, it no longer sounded sad. It sounded alive. The kind of rain that brings new beginnings. Daniel often thought back to that moment when he first saw Emma, standing alone at the bus stop. He'd almost walked past her. He almost kept the umbrella to himself. If he had, maybe he'd still be walking through life believing that love was something that only happens once. But that's the quiet miracle of kindness, it doesn't ask for anything, yet it returns more than you could ever imagine. Sometimes, it gives you back hope. Sometimes, it gives you back love. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it gives you both. As the years passed, they grew older together, their lives stitched with laughter, shared stories, and morning walks. The blue umbrella, though faded now, still hung by their door. Every time it rained, Daniel would smile and reach for it, not because he needed to stay dry, but because it reminded him how one small act of kindness had rewritten everything. In the end, it wasn't about the rain, the loss, or even the loneliness. It was about the courage to care when you could have turned away. About two people who found each other not through grand destiny, but through compassion. And that's the lesson Daniel often shared when neighbors asked about their story. He'd simply say, never underestimate the power of kindness. Because sometimes, when you reach out to help someone else, you end up saving yourself too. The rain kept falling outside, steady and calm, washing the streets clean. Inside, two hearts that had once been broken now beat in quiet harmony, proof that even after loss, love can be found again, in the most unexpected of moments, and under the simplest of umbrellas.